My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Well, hello. Thank you for joining us, Louise.
My pleasure.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
For coming up to Liberty and spending this morning with us.
It was, for me, quite a drive because I don't often venture out into North Kansas City, but it was great.
Yeah.
I got here and I
Good.
found you.
Yay.
Welcome.
And it's a beautiful day.
And it's a gorgeous day.
Yeah. Well, we
Yeah.
won't keep you too long so you can go
Oh.
enjoy it.
I'm good.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, we always dig deep in right at the beginning.
Okay.
So when you think about your inner knowing, what does it feel like for you? You know, whether it's your body or a sense or a process, anything that you can share with us.
Inner knowing or intuition, as I call it, for me feels like something I usually hear. So I'm more auditory, both for myself and when I work with people. And I feel it in my body as well. However, I don't always choose to listen to my body because there are a lot of symptoms that also come through physically. And so I don't think I trust my body intuition as much as I would like to and plan to as I keep, working on developing that sense.
Yeah.
When I hear something, I usually trust it because and it's not an actual voice, but it's an internal voice that says, something that's relevant. And so I tend to trust that more.
Yeah.
When I get it. And it often comes very quickly. Like I don't have to work that hard. Like I was supposed to go to Denver next weekend to see a friend, and I was very much looking forward to it. And sadly, she was in a car accident after we made that plan, and she's okay, but I know that she's really not okay. And then I had the sense that I really shouldn't go because it's just not the right time for her to have a visitor or for me to take care of somebody because I just am not in that place. And I had to wrestle through that a little bit because there was some interference like, oh, you're not being a good friend. You should just go and, just be there for her. And I couldn't. And I had to tell her that. Of course, she's a wonderful friend and she was very understanding. But that was an example of, oh, I'm getting a no. And sometimes I'll check that out with a pendulum or some other kind of divination guide. And this time it was like, no, it's just a no. And my fear wasn't about whether it was the right decision or not. My fear was around hurting her feelings and not being a good friend.
Yeah.
So things like that happen.
So we've got, you're talking about this, an inner dialogue with I'm not being a good friend, but
Yes.
you're, the voices that were saying she needs some time here, some
Yes.
space. So if you can, the best you can, how do you distinguish between it's just that dialogue we all have of ego or whatever it is that's stepping in, that fear versus this is the path I need to follow?
So the way I distinguish is that for many, many years now, I've been working with what I call, because I'm part of a therapy modality that used to be called body-centered Gestalt, and now they call it integrative psychotherapy, one of the tenets is that we have tenets, not tenants. Tenets is that we all have this negative, you can call it superego, the critical voice. There's lots of different names for it, right? So in this group, we call it a victimizer. And so this is 20 years now I've been working with this group, in this group. And so my work has been about distinguishing the victimizer even from the ego, because the ego can be just neutral. But the victimizer is not neutral. The victimizer is always critical and is always going to try to make you feel bad for whatever you're trying to do or express or decision. It's always going to say, oh, that's terrible. Example, you're not being a good friend. I mean, I know in my heart I'm a good friend. But if I listen to this other voice telling me, you're being selfish, and I just was processing this yesterday because our group we meet once a month and do pieces of work in a small group. And I brought this up because I was like, I'm getting assaulted for having a no. Because it involves another person. If it's just me,
Right.
it's not that big a deal. But if it's interpersonal, that's when this negative voice gets loud and wants to kind of, tell me some stuff that's not true.
Yeah.
And that's a lifelong, for me, given trauma history, et cetera, it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
Recognizing that voice and then being able to tune into different voices instead. You're nodding to each other like you know what I'm talking about.
No,
So.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I saw the name of your podcast, I thought, okay, this is something. There's a lot of things I can't talk about. I'm not educated about, but this is something I like to talk about because I think it's so important.
Yeah.
And people have such a hard time trusting their intuition, as you know. And so that's part of my work as a therapist, is helping people trust their voice.
Yeah.
For
you, Louise, as best you recall, when do you feel like you started putting energy into understanding this part of you?
I think it was in my late 20s. So in astrology, there's something called a Saturn return, which is when your life kind of falls apart. And it happens at 28 or 29. So at 28, I was living in Munich, Germany. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And then my father was diagnosed with cancer. My father died, and then my mother died, all within 2 years.
Wow.
Right at that time.
Yeah.
So I came back from Germany. I had a job there that was pretty good. Packed up, came home, and it was hell. It was 2 years of just awful. And I never got to say goodbye to my dad because he died while I was still over there. It happened very quickly. So, long story short, I got into therapy. I applied to graduate school for a PhD in psychology. And I would say when I started working with that therapist, I had worked with other therapists before. I've been in therapy for a long time. But when I started doing that work, it was spiritual. It had a spiritual component. And I would say that's when I really started becoming aware of an inner knowing.
Yeah.
And I was in so much grief and so much pain and so much confusion about everything, and also starting to have some physical issues, that it was like, I have to start listening, because if I don't, I'm just going to be lost. So therapy helped me, and then when I was toward the end of my doctorate, so I was 36, I got hit by a train.
Oh my goodness.
In my car, but I got hit driver's side and thrown the distance of a football field.
Yeah.
And was in the hospital for 2 months.
Wow.
With everything broken and a head injury, and nobody thought I was going to make it.
Yeah.
So when I got through that, I thought, okay, well, there is a reason I'm here.
Yeah.
So perhaps I really need to, first of all, feel into that I'm here, and let it affect my decisions about what kind of work I'm going to do and what kind of person I want to be.
Yeah.
You know, so working on this, working on my heart, as well as listening to the inner voice, and I think those are connected, right? So yeah, it's been a journey, you know. So, but that's what, that, I would say that's when late 20s is when it started to bloom.
And how old were you when you were in the train accident?
I was 36. And I was finishing my dissertation.
Wow.
So, and I had a brain injury and I couldn't do anything.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So I went on disability, and I got people to help with the statistics of, you know, because I was right at that point. I had to collect my data and do I was about halfway through my dissertation. So I got through that, and I graduated at 38. And then things kind of fell apart again, because this was in San Diego. Well, the housing boom was about to hit. I was renting, and I couldn't really afford to stay in San Diego in this situation because I wasn't licensed yet.
Okay.
Still recovering, couldn't deal with licensing exam, and California it's a difficult state to get licensed in.
It is, yeah.
I didn't have family there anymore by that point. So that's when I decided to move to Kansas, which people are already asking me, you left San Diego to come to Kansas? Please explain. This makes no sense to us.
Yeah.
But at the time, it made sense because I just needed a postdoc. I needed a place where I could afford to just live and work and recover. And then I thought, okay, and then I'll come back. So 25 years later, I'm still here because I liked Kansas City, and it worked out. And, you know, I got all my postdoc hours. That took a long time. And then got licensed, started private practice, and I've never looked back.
So if you don't mind me asking, were you about 40 when you got licensed?
I was exactly 40 when I got licensed and started. And that was like kind of a new beginning. And it wasn't all, you know, roses and whatever the phrase is, cupcakes and balloons, etc. It was rough. I had to do my postdoc hours several times because of bad supervisors and just all kinds of craziness. But I ended up getting most of my hours at Rainbow Mental Health Hospital. So I did inpatient with a wonderful supervisor from Germany. And I spoke German, and we kind of connected. And she was getting ready to retire, but she hung in there and helped me.
Oh.
And that was a nice support.
Yeah.
And then I shared offices for a while with people, and then I just branched out on my own. And I'm not a millionaire, but I'm doing okay. I don't think I came here to be a millionaire. So, you know, I'm very, very grateful for what I've been able to do, and wonderful clients and wonderful support system, even though my family's in California. So, yeah.
That's a lot of challenge to overcome.
Yeah. Well, yes. And there's more.
Yeah.
Not so much from the recent past, but the challenge started being a child of Holocaust survivors. I think I might have mentioned that to you. So my parents were from Poland, and they were both in Poland during the war, and my mother was in couple of concentration camps. My father got stuck in the Warsaw Ghetto for a few years, which was not a great place to be. We recently found that out because we thought he had escaped to Russia, and turns out that's not what happened. So we recently learned that his story was different than what we thought.
Wow.
For decades.
Yes.
And that he actually got typhoid fever, and so many people did not survive. I can't even remember how many millions of people died just in that place.
Wow.
But they both made it. They met at a refugee camp. They moved to Colorado, and that's where my sister and I were born. And eventually we ended up in New York, which is where we grew up. And that was a lot of trauma because they were not okay. You know, they lost everybody in their family. So no grandparents, no cousins, no aunts or uncles, you know, just very isolated. And so that's been a challenge, you know, for me. Is I would say my whole adult life is, well, working with isolation and healing enough to come out of isolation.
Sure.
And that's one of my goals, working with people also, because, you know, people who have trauma, depression, I mean, there's so much. Loneliness is a very big theme right now, and isolation. And both of those things were so foundational in my childhood. We were so isolated. We were so lonely. I mean, I had a few friends, thank goodness, in school, but it really wasn't until college that I discovered, oh, you know, this is, you know, you can have fun with other people.
Oh.
And you can go to parties, and, you know, it was like you know, it was mind-blowing because there just wasn't any of that.
Wow.
In my family. And I can hear my voice getting softer. So if you notice that and you'd like me to speak up, just tell me, because I could feel that happening. Right. It's like, oh, we're going back there now. Okay, come back.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay.
And I'm so grateful for not necessarily that childhood, but for everything it taught me, and how much compassion I'm able to have because of those experiences. And when I work with people who have all kinds of trauma, I get it. It's not like they have to explain, you know, here's what it feels like. I know. And I know what isolation feels like, and I know what disconnection feels like. And I can also be a guide in helping people toward the light, you know, toward, oh, you know, here's how you can discover your heart that's underneath all of that stuff. You know, there's a beautiful heart.
Yeah.
That the world needs.
Right.
You know, and wants you to share. And here's how to do it.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
I've got to go there now then. I mean, and I know it's not a simple answer, and it's going to change with different people that you're working with.
Right.
But when you talk about helping people reconnect with their heart, what's your process?
Well, you can't do it without going through grief. And if you're trying to find a way around grief, which I've done, and I still do sometimes because it doesn't feel good, I mean, you can't. There are no shortcuts.
Yeah.
You have to go through it. And I tell people that not to scare them, and I tell them in a more gentle way. It's like drops at a time, little pieces at a time. Let yourself feel your heart, even for a minute, even for a second, a millisecond. Feel, oh, yeah, okay, that's enough. Can't do anymore. Okay, come back. Let's go back up here to our heads where it's safe. Talk. And then if you can dip down a little bit more for a minute, okay. And in more recent years, I've discovered a lot of us, including me, need nervous system regulation before we can do the grief work.
Yeah.
And nervous system regulation hasn't been talked about very long, because polyvagal theory, you know, that's all pretty new.
Yes.
So I myself just getting familiar and studying and practicing nervous system regulation.
Yes.
And it's changing everything. And so I work with my clients on it. Sometimes it's the first thing we'll do.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it feels safer than saying, okay, we're going to talk about your childhood now.
Yeah.
Tell me about your mother. And they're like halfway out the door. So instead I say, well, check in and tell me what your breathing feels like. Does it feel easy, or does it feel like it gets kind of stuck? Or, how's your breath? And they'll be like, yeah, it's not great. It's shallow. Okay, let's practice some breathing. We're doing nervous system regulation.
Yes.
We're doing polyvagal.
Yes.
Or I teach them how to tap. Now we're doing polyvagal. We don't have to talk about your childhood at all until and unless you're ready.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people may not ever be ready, and that's okay. I used to feel a little, I would say even judgmental about that. I used to feel like, okay, come on, got to talk about it. At some point, you got to talk about it. And I'm not so sure now.
Yeah.
Because I think you can heal yourself so much by healing your nervous system that whatever other issues need to be addressed, they might just come up organically without so much pressure. A client one day might wake up and realize, oh, I'm having really sad dreams, or I'm crying, or there's something going on. And then they want to work on it.
Right.
Rather than, okay, I'm coming in because, I hate my job. And that's as far as they want to go.
Right.
But we can still work on, okay, you hate your job. How's your job make me feel? Tense. I can't breathe. I'm angry. I want to punch somebody. Oh, okay, let's do some techniques to help you feel more regulated.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, Louise. What it makes me think about is when I started doing my trauma work, I was focused more on things from my childhood. But what I recognized in the midst of that work was that my anxiety around flying disappeared. And I was like, well, I didn't even work on that.
Isn't that interesting?
But recognizing that the other work I was doing was allowing that to go as well.
Yeah.
So that makes sense the way you describe it.
It's a great example too.
Yeah. Anyway, we're so complex. But no, it's I hear you even around the judgment piece. If we can just be with clients where they're at.
Yes, which starts with being with ourselves where we're at. And that's that's why I go to therapy. That's why I'm in a training group, because literally yesterday I was working on this issue of I feel guilty because I'm not going to help my friend. And I got support from a whole room full of people who could say, it's okay. You have limitations. You're doing what your intuition is telling you to do.
Right.
Your friend will understand, which she totally did because she's part of this group.
Yeah.
And, and her response was beautiful.
Yeah.
And now I feel better. And now I'm not like, oh my God, I have to pack and I'm such a busy week. And when am I going to, it's like, oh, okay. It's like, we don't have to push ourselves like we do. So being with people where they are, being with ourselves where we are, letting ourselves be. For those of us who are overachievers or got pushed to be perfectionists, whatever you want, this is work. It's work to let that go and just believe that, oh, you mean I'm lovable even if I'm not perfect?
Right.
People love to be around me even if I'm not helping them or taking care of them in some way. I can't even fathom that.
Right. Is that the only value that we have?
Exactly.
Right. No inherent value, only what I can offer others.
And we learn that in our childhoods, and we learn it in our culture,
absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think so much of that is, that makes me a bad person,
Right.
And
the victimizer.
Yeah. Right. Right.
if you're not perfect, you're bad.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are,
No, it's interesting. I mean, what it makes me think about is how, like, let's say you, I don't know, went anyway, right? Even though, you're having this experience, it's like, don't go. And then you can't be there for your friend anyway,
Right.
because you didn't have anything to give.
right.
Right. So then the presence just becomes not present. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's probably repair that has to happen.
Right.
because we can't be present,
Right.
Yeah.
And there's going to be resentment in
Right.
me.
Mhm.
And you're absolutely right. So having the ability to look into the future and visualize, okay, what would happen if I did go?
Yes.
And then know that,
Right.
rather than, oh, you should just go and stop being such a poop and everything will be okay. Because I used to listen to that voice
Yeah.
regularly.
Mhm.
And I know many people do.
Yeah.
So it takes work to get to that place where you can be more honest and be more compassionate with yourself and see it that clearly,
Right.
like you described. Well,
Yeah.
what if it's like this? And then you're going to feel XYZ. No, it's not worth it.
Yeah. And the better we know ourselves, the more honest we are with ourselves,
Yes.
right? When we continue building that trust, those internal conversations are actually much more helpful.
Absolutely. It's a world of difference.
Yeah.
When you don't have an internal enemy,
Yes.
it makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
And you know how it is working with clients.
Mm-hmm.
And we call it you're being hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's so pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
And even with people not in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
you just go on Facebook or you listen to the news or you watch a show. And it's like, it's everywhere.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
are not kind to ourselves at all.
No.
It's seen as weakness.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I'm on a crusade for however long I'm still going to be around. I'm on a crusade to change that stigma.
Mm-hmm.
When you say it's seen as weakness, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about compassion,
Mm-hmm.
kindness, vulnerability. That's the big one, the V word.
Yeah.
All seen as weakness, and not just by men,
Mm-hmm.
but because we
Right.
live in a
Nice.
patriarchal system,
Right.
those are the pervasive values.
Right.
So you got to man up.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're a woman, you got to woman up.
Yeah.
Put on your big girl panties. I mean, just the language that we use,
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
to convey this message that you have to be strong or you're not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So of course boys can't cry.
Mm-hmm.
Of course men can't come to therapy and talk about how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And women too. If you're a career woman, if you're a CEO or you have any kind of career business where you got to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. All the
At
time.
least from 9 to 5.
Right. Or pretend anyway.
Or pretend. and of course that's what makes us ill.
Right.
If you pretend long enough, you're going to get an illness.
Yeah. Our
And-
body.
Yes, you are.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe we all know that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe
So-
at this table. we
Maybe
all
at
know
this
that.
table we all know that, and it's real, and we can't deny it, and
Mm.
and unfortunately, our medical system, it's kind of accepted now that that we need to manage stress,
Mm-hmm.
but still,
Mm-hmm.
the medical profession doesn't really encourage us to take care of ourselves
No.
because
no.
doctors don't take care of themselves.
Right.
And
Right.
nurses don't take care of themselves. And so the message is just so pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the air we breathe.
Yeah.
Keep on going. Keep on
on
pushing.
going.
Don't,
Yeah.
don't take naps. Naps
Yeah.
are bad. Really? I've been taking them for about 40 years. I think they're pretty great.
Yeah.
But-
especially if you're outside in a hammock or something like that,
well,
right?
then, yeah.
Even better.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting, the medical piece. I was I do post-grad supervision, for licensure.
Oh,
and,
wonderful.
So I hear a lot of stories, let alone the stories I have in my office. But we were talking about someone who was recently started having seizures, and did all of the medical, everything you could do, right? And they just said this is a mental health issue. It's not a physiological issue.
Yes.
Right.
There we go.
Here
The
we
split.
go.
Yeah.
Right. And even with that awareness, the message is delivered. There's something wrong with you, the way
Right.
you think.
Right.
Right. So then she goes to someone for therapy. Right. And that is the first person that said, have you recently had a trauma? And she was like, yeah, I have. And it's like, so we know medically that traumas can trigger seizures,
Yeah, but we don't ask.
but we don't ask.
It's nuts.
Yeah, we just make you feel like you're nuts,
Right.
instead of saying, hey, yeah, we know this can happen, and so maybe you could go get some help around that, as opposed to something in you is broken.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Shame. Ooh, so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got our work cut out for us, don't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I say this about every time we have a conversation. It's like it is for life.
Yeah.
The process will continue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my victimizer is still there, still talking, but the change is, at least I recognize it some of the time. Hey,
that's huge progress.
The victimizer.
Yes.
We don't have to have that conversation.
We don't have to go
We're going
there.
in a different direction.
Yeah.
But it comes out, and sometimes I'm just lost in it.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's, I think we all want the easy button, and it was just, rainbows and cupcakes, like you said, and that's not why we're here. I'm convinced. We're
agree.
here to learn. And
Yep.
as Theresa says, if we can get to the point where we are minimizing the time that we're in that space, listening to the victimizer
Yes.
or whatever it may be, stuck in that loop,
Yes.
and it doesn't go as deep.
Yes.
We're
The impact.
moving in the right
We
direction.
lessen the impact.
Yeah.
And that may be the best we can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm okay with that at this point.
No, me too.
And
Yeah.
then, I mean, when I was 40 or 30, I thought, I'm going to have this all cleaned up.
Yeah.
10 years.
Thank you for saying that.
Actually, it was in my late 30s. In my 30s, I thought by the time, in 10 years, I'm going to have this all fixed. And I'm going to be great. And I'm going to have successful relationships So, and it's been disappointing. And I've had some grief, and I still have some grief about how long it's taking.
Yeah.
And then I remember where I came from.
Oh my gosh.
And I think, wow, what a miracle that I'm even here.
Right.
And I have a doctoral degree.
Yes.
And I have a community, and I have a successful business.
Yes.
And I can smile, and I'm funny.
Mm-hmm.
That's a those are all miracles,
Right.
in my mind.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. I agree.
Where do you think, because I think it's part of the human condition, the victimizer comes from?
well, so in psychoanalytic theory, we talk about interjects,
Mhm.
right? We talk about the parts of the parent that we as children took in.
Mhm.
Because children, especially younger children, don't have the ability to keep anything out.
Right.
They just absorb. You've
Right.
probably heard they're like little sponges, right?
Mhm.
So they take everything in, and they take in the good. So they take in love, caring, humor, joy. They take that in.
Yeah.
And they also take in grief, despair, death energy, meanness.
Mhm.
They take all of it in.
Right.
So we think of the victimizer as the interjected parts of not only the parents, but it's intergenerational.
Right.
And now more people are talking about that.
Yes.
So, it's grandparents, it's great-grandparents, it's going back as far as you care to go back.
Mhm.
And we know now that this actually changes our DNA. It's not just a theory
Right.
about, it's not some woo-woo idea that we somehow mysteriously inherit the trauma of our ancestors.
Right.
It's physiological.
Right. Absolutely.
And when I first learned about that, it resonated so deeply that I don't even have a word to describe it. It was like, oh, well, of course. Like, I already knew that. I mean, in my heart, in my gut, I knew that was true.
Right.
I just didn't have any support to say it.
Yeah.
You know?
Is it, I can't remember, Louise, if you remember the recent research around that. Is it 7 generations, 13 generations that because they're studying it
Yes.
on rats. And so they're experimenting with them. And then just because it's prolific in how many generations go down, that the damage to the central nervous system lasts a certain number of generations. And so I just can't remember.
I don't remember the number
research.
either, but yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion, and I don't have your training. I'm a trial lawyer.
I might need your
I've done
wisdom.
lots of therapy over the last several years after having, the event that made me start even recognizing, hey. I just suspect, and this is probably from a spiritual basis, that even without the intergenerational trauma, even if our parents did nothing but love us, that we might still have the victimizer. And we
For
might
spiritual
still have
reasons.
empathy and kindness and all those things, even if they didn't give us that.
Fascinating. So you're saying it's part of our makeup as humans.
I am, but for me, it's from a spiritual basis, not a particular religious basis. But just, my belief about, why we even come here in the first place.
Yes.
And so that's just my suspicion, is that we might put the barriers in our own way.
Or even choose the barriers.
Right, exactly.
So I believe in that as well.
Yeah.
I totally believe that. And if you study astrology, you can see so much in a person's chart about what they came in to do. It's right there. Now, of course, people can interpret it differently.
Right.
Like psychology. There's no one way to interpret it,
Right.
an issue, right?
Right.
But sometimes it's just unmistakable. It's like, this person came in with so much trauma, and here's the support they have, and here are the things that are going to make it harder. And that fascinates me too, because it's not that different from what you're saying.
Right.
Which is, we choose how we're going to evolve to the next place.
I don't know anything about astrology, even though I've had some readings done. I couldn't speak
That's okay.
even to it at all. But was that something that you started studying at some point?
I actually was interested back in the 90s in grad school. I really liked Jung.
Yes.
So I read a little bit of Jung, and I read some Jungian astrology, and I thought, I got to get back to this sometime. And then, and then life happened. So during the pandemic, when there was free time, I just thought, I'm going to start listening to some podcasts, take some classes, and I just fell in. And so it hasn't been very long, and I'm not an astrologer, but I'm a very avid student, and I love studying with different teachers who have different perspectives.
Sure.
Particularly, there are women astrologers who are focusing more on the feminine or the female energies and asteroids, and it's very different from kind of the old school Greco-Roman. Like Mars is all about war, and that's it's like there's so much more to look at than that. And that fascinates me. So I don't think I'll ever be an astrologer, but I'll be an eternal student.
Yeah,
because I just find it so interesting and fulfilling.
Yeah,
and true.
So interesting.
Like just knowing my chart, it's like, oh well, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That's why I'm this way, and that's why I struggle with this. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. a way of helping us see ourselves more clearly so that we can do our work around.
Yes.
Right? Have more compassion and understanding.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah.
And feel and be less victimized.
Yes, yes.
So taking responsibility. Oh, this is my chart. Or this is my victimizer. Nobody's causing me to suffer. I chose every experience I've ever had, good and bad. On some level, now you got to be careful when you say this to clients, right?
Oh, yeah,
right.
It's hard. That's hard.
They're not all ready, and so you have to use so much discernment. Otherwise, it feels like you're blaming, right? But at some point, if you want to evolve and get beyond, oh, I'm a victim and life sucks and my childhood sucked and everything sucked. If you want to get beyond that, you have to go that way. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation or you don't believe in astrology, you can still entertain the idea that you chose your experiences. And even if you don't believe that, like, my father was horrible and there's no way I chose him. Okay, well, what did you learn? What have you learned from your horrible father?
Yeah.
And how did your horrible father contribute to making you who you are today? And I don't mean just, I'm angry and I have an ulcer, but what are the good qualities that you developed because of him or in spite of him?
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you embrace that? And then eventually down the road get to a place of forgiveness, gratitude, Not that I'm anywhere close to that. Please don't, make that assumption. But that's where I'm going.
You're on the path.
I'm on that path because what other path is there?
Right.
Feeling like a victim till you're 80.
Right.
That doesn't sound appealing.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. There's, I've done a lot of work in that area around my parents, and the freedom that comes with that is.
That's the word.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
What's really been good for me in that process is, and it doesn't happen all the time, but trying to remove the labels of good and bad.
Oh, spoken like a true Buddhist.
Exactly. That's where I picked it up.
There you go.
In any event, when you can get yourself in that space as best you can, it helps a lot with the resistance. It has for me anyway.
Absolutely.
Or the bent towards, God is punishing me.
Well,
right?
And even the me, right? Speaking of Buddhism, even this belief that we have this solid ego, that we have to take such good care of and make sure our ego doesn't get, and we also call that taking things personally.
Right.
So you have a client talking about this terrible thing that happened, and sometimes you want to ask them, are you sure that was personal? And was that really about you, or could that have been about what was happening with them when they said that to you?
Yeah.
And sometimes people can see, oh, yeah, maybe, they were having a bad day. Maybe it wasn't me. And even if it was me, who's me?
Yes.
But that's down the road.
That's down the road.
Yeah.
Not session 1.
That's not session 1, or probably even 50.
I was going to say,
Oh my goodness.
But it's a wonderful place. It sounds like you both know what a rewarding place and a free place that can be. Even if you just get there momentarily and then you go back.
Absolutely.
It's like you get to enjoy that moment of, oh, the me that I think is me is not all of who I am.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I just think that story that we carry, at least in our culture, because I don't know how people are taught in other cultures, but we do seem to reinforce that if you do that thing, that is you. And it's so difficult. You know, the retreat we're doing in November is called Just Like Me.
Yes.
And really trying to help people, I don't know, see all our parts, right?
Yes.
Because we all have them. I mean,
Yes.
we don't want to, but man,
We don't have a choice.
Oh,
Yeah. I know. I read about that retreat and I thought, I got to check and see if I can do it.
wow.
Because that's exactly what is
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah.
You know? And in this training I mentioned, it's not called IFS, but that's really what it is, because we work on integrating all the parts.
Yeah.
It just has a different name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what Gestalt therapy started out to be, right? You sit in a chair or put somebody in a chair and, you know, now you're talking to your dad or whatever.
Right.
And it's all the internalized parts.
Right.
So, yeah, that work is critically important.
It is.
And it's hard.
Yes.
I'm having some resistance right now because there's some parts of me I'm not liking, and it came up with this canceling this trip and assaults around being selfish, and that in turn makes me have to go back to my childhood, and not about how selfish I was, but about what I didn't get as an infant. And when you're an infant, your job is to be selfish.
Yes.
And completely self-focused. Right?
Yes.
But if you're in a dysfunctional family where you really don't have the freedom to do that, or somehow it gets stifled, then you become a parentified child, right? And now, even though you're 8, you're taking care of people.
Right.
And so then at 60, maybe sometimes you feel like, no, I don't want to take care of this person. I just need to take care of me.
Yes.
And then there's a victimizer.
Yes.
Like, oh, now you're being selfish.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded way of saying that's what I had to work through yesterday in my group, was going back to the baby.
Yeah.
And feeling her. How many people want to do that?
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
That's how many. 0.
Yeah.
You know, feel the rage, feel how you couldn't stop crying. Imagine how lonely you felt, how disconnected you felt. Someone's telling you to shush and you need to scream.
Yes.
That's integration. I mean, if you can integrate that, now you're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think of the work we did with Clay. So we both did a vision quest separately out in Sedona with a man named Clay Miller.
Okay.
And that's his work that he has you do when you're out there in the desert mesa by yourself for 3 days is really...
I'm going to need to get that name from you.
You are,
because I had a vision quest on my bucket list for a while, and I
Clay
love
Miller.
Sedona.
Yeah, he does a lovely job.
Good to
Kind
know.
man.
Oh, good to
And but it is resonating with that,
Yeah.
you know, those younger parts of you. And he does basically like a session with you when you first arrive. He records it. He takes you out to your spot. He gives you the recorder so you can listen to it.
Nice.
And he helps you and gives you tools to access those sounds, you know, that we don't tend to.
Yes.
Well, and maybe we do make them,
Yeah.
but we don't recognize
Yes.
the impact of them,
Yes.
right? Or understand our bodies need to release them. And so,
Very, very, very important.
Yeah, I got it when I was out there. Yeah, I was like, oh, I know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Lovely.
It's wonderful.
It was a great experience.
It was.
For both
it
of
was.
us.
For
In
both
different
of us.
ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have done it by yourselves?
We
did.
did.
Oh, you weren't together?
No,
No,
it was
no.
separate
Oh,
times.
it's a separate
Like a
trip.
month
Yeah.
apart.
So I went, I think you went in September, I
And
went
you
in
went
October.
October.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we
Well-
met him at the same time at an event. We both felt like he was so authentic
Okay.
and really kind, compassionate, thoughtful, intentional.
Wonderful.
And so when we looked him up and we saw that was an option, we could have done it together, but we decided to do it individually, knowing that we would have a different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
We'll get you his information.
Thank
'cause
you.
I just think
Yeah,
it's
we
great.
will.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love Sedona.
Yeah, it's lovely.
So special.
I want to take us back before I forget, because I'm like, don't forget that. Don't forget that. Early on in the conversation, you had said, I'd been to some therapists, and then I got to a therapist that introduced some spirituality. And I may be misinterpreting or misstating how you said, and that made a big difference. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So this was in San Diego, and this was a therapist I started working with right away. I can't remember how I found her, but it doesn't matter. She was just spiritual from the get-go. I mean, that was her approach. It wasn't like an additional thing. It was just, this is how I work.
Okay.
And what I remember most clearly is she would do these weekend workshops where it was 2 or 2.5 days at her home. There was this big room, and everybody would sit in a circle on the floor and do shadow work. Basically do parts work.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
So, and I was 28,
Wow.
29. So that's how long I've been doing this.
Yeah.
And it would include at the end, I remember there's this wonderful ceremony where we would all wear white and walk through this pathway with candles. And I can't remember the details because it was so long ago, but there was an intense working, and then there was like a purification at the end where you would kind of either burn something or just let something go.
Yeah.
And what I remember most clearly is the people, because I did this for, at least 10 years. That's how long I was in San Diego. So 10 years of this. And it was the same people.
Wow.
For the most part.
Wow.
And so then you would develop friendships and bonds with those people.
Yes.
Kind of like my training group now.
Yes.
There's a similar energy, which I think is why I was so drawn to it.
Yeah.
Because everyone is wanting the same thing. Now, in my current group, everyone's a therapist or studying to be a therapist. In San Diego, there were people from all different, which was fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everyone had the same goal, which was, we just want to work on our stuff.
Right.
And we just want to be able to forgive or let go of anger or work on, parts of us that we can't accept. And that's what happened. And it was phenomenal.
It's lovely.
For our listeners, when you say shadow work, can you give a little bit more information for them?
The shadow, so this again goes back to Jung. The shadow refers to any part of us that we have not integrated, that we kind of keep out there. So, for example, I love the fact that I have a good sense of humor. I am intelligent. I make friends easily, et cetera, et cetera. I'm compassionate. I love all that about me, right? Okay, how about the parts of me that get extremely angry, resentful, feel like they don't want to be around anybody at all, want to isolate, feel angry at the world, feel ashamed. So that's also part of me. But those parts, for a lot of us, we consider that the shadow because we haven't yet integrated them into the whole,
Right.
into the gestalt, the whole of who we are. So it's like, I don't ever get angry. There are people who say that. Or,
Right.
I don't get angry. And that's someone I'd love to work with.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not true, because it's impossible to never get angry.
Right.
But it's very possible to keep it out of yourself and say no, and just deny that that's a part of you.
Right.
So that's the shadow.
Right.
And the shadow can also be positive things, which I almost forgot to say.
Sure.
So part of my shadow might be
Nice point.
wanting to, I think I'm funny and I want to do improv, but no, I'm not really that funny. So I'm going to keep it over here. I'm not really going to integrate that fully or act on it because
Right.
it's scary.
Right.
Or the part of me that, oh, maybe I do want to be a millionaire. Oh, but rich people are usually, you know what, fill in the blank.
Right.
And
right.
it's if you don't have a lot of money, you're a better person.
Right.
We can tell ourselves those things too.
Right.
And maybe being a millionaire would be fine.
Yeah.
But that could be part of my shadow if I can't integrate it as being okay.
Right.
I'm going to keep it out here or out there.
Yeah.
Does that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when we first spoke, we do an informational interview and just get to meet people before they come on the show. But you had said that you've never told your story. And I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share anything else along the way
sweet.
that would be helpful for you to share.
I think I've shared enough of my childhood to, I don't think I need more around that. And what I would want to emphasize for everyone who might be listening is two things that seem opposite. One is how pervasive trauma can be and how it can affect you for your whole life, as it has me. And as we get older, it doesn't necessarily get easier because now there's aging along with trauma. And so, my memory's not that great. Is that still my nervous system, or is that because I'm getting older? So aging brings in its own challenges. But the point is, trauma is a big deal, and it should not be underplayed or dismissed. Even if you never were in the military, you've never witnessed someone getting killed or in a terrible car accident, because a lot of people think that's what trauma is.
Right.
It's not just that.
Right. Right.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that there's tremendous hope. And I think connection is what heals trauma. So I'm not even going to say therapy heals trauma, because it's not true. It's the connection that you can get in therapy or by being in a group
Yes.
or any kind of holistic community where you feel seen and heard.
Yes.
That's how the healing happens.
Yeah.
And there's always hope
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. I agree. We just keep stepping into and experimenting, finding the contrast, finding what is safe for us. And
Yes, safety. Yeah, that's the word. So many people feel like they're in a bind because they want to connect, they want more community, they want relationship, but that's also the area where the trauma happened, because most trauma, childhood trauma, is interpersonal.
Right.
Right? And so it creates this bind of, I need contact, I need connection, but oh my God, it doesn't feel safe.
Right.
I only feel safe when I'm by myself.
Right.
But now I'm lonely.
Right.
So it's literally,
Right.
this is the process,
Right.
and that's what therapy's been for me.
Yes.
For, 40 plus years is that,
Yeah.
and sometimes only being able to take in a little safety, sometimes being able to take in more, and then having to retreat and regroup,
Yes.
and then, okay, I'm ready for more.
Yeah.
And to not judge that,
Yeah.
because that's what I did for eons. Like, when are you ever going to get it? It's taking so long. You're so slow. And that's so not helpful. It's so not helpful.
Yeah.
And now I do that less. I still do it a little. I'm turning 65 this month, and that's activating a victimizer around. So you're 65 and you're still dealing with this stuff, really? And I can say, just back off.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say something not quite as polite, but I just, just back off. I don't need your judgment.
Yeah. Not helpful.
I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And
Yeah.
Here's a list of all the wonderful things in my life.
Mm.
See you later.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how we do it.
Thank you, Louise.
Oh,
thank you for
this
this.
was wonderful. Thank you
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
It was even more fun than I thought it would be.
Yay.
Because you guys are wonderful. So
Oh,
thank you.
that's what
Thank
makes
you.
the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice to get to know you a little better. Thank you.
Yeah. As we've seen
Anytime.
each other's names over the years and
Yes.
little interaction personally.
Right.
So
Right. We have a journey home connection.
Yeah.
And I see you on the
GKC.
I can never remember
Yeah.
the letters.
Yeah. GKC page. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
wonderful to
Yeah.
know you this way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to check your, is your retreat full?
I think we have a few spots left.
I need to
Yeah.
check the dates, but I'm
Yeah.
interested in what you're doing. So I'll make sure I'm getting.
It will be
Info.
powerful for sure. Yeah. Well, in the group process, I value it so much
There's
too.
nothing like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I
It's
agree.
so powerful.
Yeah.
And astrologically, we're in that energy too of the me and the we, and needing to balance the me and the we.
Mm.
And it's big.
Wow.
It's powerful.
Yay.
So yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It was really nice. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.